Welcome to Reese Rambles, my weekly wrap-up of all the comings and goings in the worlds of retro computing and retro gaming that I just haven't had time to make individual standalone videos about, much as I would have liked to, because I've been very, very busy over the past couple of weeks rebuilding and relocating this studio, believe it or not, and that is something that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on in the ramble. But I hope you're all well. Welcome to the weekend, of course, more importantly, and indeed a bank holiday weekend here in the UK, so I hope we get some decent weather. But first of all, I think before we get into any of that, let's take a look at our first story of the week, because this is something that I'm really excited about. This is a project that I have a lot of love for. I use it personally myself multiple times a week, either for YouTube-related stuff or indeed just for playing games and stuff. And that is the MiSTer FPGA project. And let's just take a quick look at this. I'm going to give a very quick explanation of what this is about. You know, my audience aren't all necessarily as technical and terminally online as I am, and nice to have a bit of a refresher. So the MiSTer FPGA project was all designed around this board called the DE10 Nano by a company called Jurassic. And what this thing does is it has an FPGA chip on it, which can run all these different systems from the earliest sort of 1970s, well, even earlier stuff than that, all the way up to your 90s stuff, a 90s PC, 486 PC, Sega Saturn, PlayStation, N64. And it can all run on this chip called the FPGA. Really, really clever stuff, and it's a highly, highly accurate way of recreating the hardware in those machines at a hardware level. A load of stuff is built up around this. Trust me, this explanation will be relevant and all will become clear very soon, I promise. A load of stuff is built up around this board, a whole ecosystem of people selling accessories, RAM expansions, which you need to run some of those systems, not all of them, but some of them, interface boards with inputs and outputs, video outputs, controller inputs, all of that stuff, so you can use your original controllers on this thing. And yeah, just a whole, like I say, a whole kind of ecosystem of things around these boards. Nice ways to package them up, nice cases, that kind of thing. I have the MiSTer multi-system myself, which is really nice, kind of consoleized, all-in-one system. But the one thing that's always been an issue with these is that DE10 board itself, because basically no one has been able to clone it as cheaply and to produce it as cheaply as the original company that designed it, Jurassic, just because they build these things in such quantities that they get, they get everything so cheap, and it's kind of subsidized because of the educational aspect of it as well. And these boards are $225, which makes the barrier to entry to get into the world of MiSTer quite high. It's kind of always been seen as a bit of a rich person's toy in the retro gaming world, compared to stuff like your Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. And I'm very, very pleased to say that that's actually no longer the case, and that someone has actually produced a clone of the DE10. Really exciting stuff. So this is Taki Udon, a fellow tech YouTuber, channel I've been watching for a very long time now. Love his stuff. It's very, very good. Well worth checking out. And I will link to his channel, of course, and to a video that he's made about this. But yeah, he announced on Twitter earlier this week that he's designed a $99 MiSTer FPGA board, so that's less than half the price of the original. It's essentially a one-to-one clone. There are some very, very minor changes. There's also some quite big improvements. So actually followed up with another tweet on this talking about the power consumption. Basically, the whole DC to DC converter circuitry on this board has been reworked compared to the original, so it can run on 5 or 12 volts. And it uses 1.5 to 2 watts less when it's running than the original board. And yeah, I mean, these FPGA chips do eat a lot of power just by very nature of how they work. So that's fantastic. That's a really cool development. And also that there will be different versions of this, like a version designed for like a games console specific version with a load of stuff already built in. Like I say, that they're usually kind of available as external add-ons onto the existing ecosystem. And that there will also be a handheld version of this. I did take a look at a MiSTer handheld in a video a couple of years ago now that Richard from Hebrew had designed. I will link to that so you can take a look at that. I don't have it up here to be able to show you, but it was a huge, great chunky thing. It was quite awesome to hold and to play with, but because it had that original board in it. But now, obviously, Taki Udon and the rest of the people behind this project, he's actually a partner in the project and involved with the hardware design. They managed to get hold of the FPGA chips, and they can do whatever they want with them and build them into all sorts of stuff and do it in a very, very cost-effective way, which is so cool to see. And yesterday, he dropped a video on his second channel, Taki 2, And basically, this is a really lovely video. This really very nicely shot and nicely explained. Just taking a look at the original D10 board and going over his clone, which is called the MiSTer FPGA for now. But it does mention in the video that it may well be rebranded by the time it gets launched. And talking about the differences, also talks about this new RAM module that he's designed. So like I mentioned, you do need a RAM module to be able to run some of the kind of higher end systems on the MiSTer, on the DE10. And the RAM module, the existing one, is about $60 for 128 megabytes. And he's actually redesigned it, designed his own version, uses the exact same chips, runs through all the benchmarks and stuff in the video, showing that performance is exactly the same. But this is a quarter of the price of the existing MiSTer RAM modules at $15. So that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, the board itself's half the price, the RAM's a quarter of the price. So yeah, massive, massive reduction in the barrier to entry to get into this world of MiSTer, which is why I'm very excited about it. I mean, obviously I already own one, but I use it for video capture for some of the videos that I do. I also use it just to play games on and play with sort of systems that I don't physically own. And indeed systems that I do physically own, but I can't be bothered to get down off the shelf and set up, because in the case of this, I can just go through and pick it from a menu and be up and running in a couple of seconds. And yeah, it's such an exciting project, this. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this, of course. I will keep people up to date. But yeah, it's a mature project. He does say that there will be probably at least one other revision of the board just to iron out a few things just before it does go on sale. But it's not a Kickstarter. They're not asking for people's money up front, anything like that. This isn't some vaporware thing, some long-running pie-in-the-sky dream type thing. This is an actual physical board that exists, that's ready to go into production, and they've announced that, yeah, they're going to be selling these things for $100 each, which is absolutely fantastic. So, cool project this from a cool YouTuber that I've kind of admired and watched for a very long time now, and very much something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. So, yeah, watch the Rambles for updates. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and all of that, and I will keep you abreast of all of the developments on this. So just sticking with the world of MiSTer just for a moment, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some other exciting news from this week, or at least something that I'm personally quite excited about, because big fan of this guy's work and a big fan of some of these games that are being actively worked on and that will be coming to MiSTer in the near future, allegedly. And yeah, the person I'm talking about is Jotego, or Jotego. I'm never really sure how to pronounce that. I'll go with Jotego. Of course, real name Jose, a very prolific MiSTer FPGA developer from Spain who has brought us loads of really, really awesome arcade systems on the MiSTer. So if you've played pretty much any arcade game from the 70s, 80s or 90s on the MiSTer, there's a very good chance you've actually played something that he's developed, because yeah, like I say, the guy's done a lot of work, and he does fantastic work. All supported by Patreon as well, of course, if you want to go and back that and get early access to some of the stuff that he's working on. But yeah, it has been announced this week that he is back working on the Sega System 18. And that's something that he has previously kind of looked at and then kind of put aside to go and work on some other projects. But he's back on it now in a big way, apparently. And you may not be familiar with that name if you're not sort of into the arcade world in a big way. And that's perfectly fine, because, of course, the important thing is the games that actually run on that platform. And there's a list here, courtesy of timeextension.com, of course, one of my favourite websites. And we've got Blockseed and Shadow Dancer from 1989. And then 1990, we've got Alien Storm. Love that game. Great game. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, another fantastic game. In fact, let's take a quick look at Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. I absolutely love playing this on my MAME arcade cabinet. It's well worth checking out on MAME. And of course, if you don't have access to MAME, it will be coming to the MiSTer soon as well. But a really cool isometric shooter game, obviously based around around Michael Jackson's Moonwalker film that was out around that time. Very good, very weird, kind of cult classic film from the 80s. So really looking forward to that coming out on the MiSTer, of course. As we continue down the list, yeah, we've got Laser Ghost, of course, as well from 1990. Not familiar with that one. Clutch Hitter from 1991 and DD Crew, also from 1991. And from 1992, we have Wally Wosagasi, which I'll talk about in a second, and Desert Breaker, which is another game that I'm actually not familiar with. So it'd be fun to check out some of those new games. But yeah, Wally Wosagasi, I wanted to bring some attention to this, because this is a game based around Where's Wally, or Where's Waldo if you're American. It may have a different name in the part of the world that you come from. But Yeah, if you remember the Where's Wally books from when we were kids and trying to find him in the crowds of people and stuff, I think they're still going today. I'm sure they're still making new ones. They actually made an arcade game of that, and it's not just that. There's other kind of gameplay elements to it as well. But yeah, this came out in Japan in 1992. It was released by Sega, and it's a really interesting and weird thing. I think it maybe aimed more at kids or maybe drunken pub patrons. But this is one that I'm really looking forward to playing again. My arcade cabinet sadly is kind of out of action at the minute, so being able to pick it up and play it on my MiSTer with my arcade stick is going to be really cool. So yeah, that's Wally Wo Sagasi. Again, pronunciation. Japanese is I'm learning, I'm trying, but I'm doing it the Duolingo way, which probably isn't the optimal way to learn a language. But yeah, great game, well worth checking out. And then there's another little morsel of information in here, which has apparently come from a YouTuber called Pixel Cherry Ninja, who I think I mentioned last week because I think there was some drama around him, but not a channel that I watch. But has also dropped a bit of a hint that Jotego is also working on a CPS3 core, which is something that people have been wanting for a very long time. The CPS3, of course, is a legendary arcade system made by Capcom. And released in 1996. So this is a much later system, much more complex system, which is why it's been quite tricky to implement on the MiSTer. And this, when he does get it working, is going to bring us Street Fighter 3, mainly. Street Fighter 3, a few of the games in that series. Red Earth, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, good grief, and the follow-up to that, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Heritage for the Future. Not played the JoJo games. I think they're just like fighting games that are based on Street Fighter 3. But loads of cool new games coming to MiSTer. I mean, it's a constant, constantly new stuff coming to the platform. But I think let's move on from MiSTer now and move into some other retro computing news. Now, a question that I'm sure many of us in the world of retro computing have asked ourselves over the years. I know I certainly did as a kid when my dad used to bring home magazines and encyclopedias and computer history books and that kind of stuff, because he was an engineer and knew that I was very much into the world of computers. And I remember there was a particular piece of exotic hardware that I used to lust after as a kid, because I was a very weird kid. I was a very nerdy kid, which should probably come as no surprise to anybody. But the question is, have you ever wanted to own a supercomputer? And in my case, like I say, the answer was yes. And that specific machine was the Cray 1, the original Cray supercomputer from 1975. I remember seeing pictures of this thing, and I think there was like an encyclopedia article that talked a bit about how it worked and how it was constructed and stuff. I just thought, that's the coolest thing ever, But yeah, why are they running like weather simulations and boring stuff like that on it rather than games? Surely you'd be able to play an amazing game of Mario on this thing. That's kid thinking for you. And I still think very much that way. And if you want to own, unfortunately, there isn't a Cray 1 for sale that I know of, unfortunately. But if you want to own the modern equivalent of this thing, and a thing that's probably orders and orders of magnitude more powerful, I mean, you can simulate one of these things on a Raspberry Pi. You could probably simulate 1,000 of these things concurrently on a Raspberry Pi, because that's how much technology has moved on. But if you want to own a modern supercomputer, the modern take on this, if you like, there's one for sale, and this story comes to me via Hackaday, and this is very exciting. So it says the headline of this is, "Psst, want to buy an old supercomputer?" And this is talking about the Cheyenne, which was built in 2016. And indeed, back in 2016, it was in the top 20 most powerful supercomputers in the world, and that was only 8 years ago. So this is actually a current and a very exciting piece of hardware. Of course, it's the size of a room, as you might expect. And yeah, it's built around the Silicon Graphics Ice XA system. It has 8,064 18-core processors in it, which is a total of 145,152 cores. And no, I didn't just do the maths on that. That's what it says in the article. And it has a 313,344 gigabytes of memory. Wow. And the operating system that it runs, SUSE Linux. I'm not even joking. One of the first Linux distributions that I actually played with back as a teenager in the late 90s, before the whole OpenSUSE thing and all that kind of stuff, when it was a bit of a commercial offering. They still do that commercial offering. Still the same company as far as I know. And making supercomputer operating systems now. So lots of good stuff ported to Linux over the years. Perhaps you could even run Doom on it. I mean, I ran Doom on a desk quite recently. Perhaps I ran Doom on a 145,000 core supercomputer would be a good follow-up to that. Although I imagine I'd need to make quite a lot more in ad revenue to cover the cost of that video. But anyway, like I say, this thing's been owned by the US government. Apparently, it was used for atmospheric simulations and earth sciences, according to the story. And it's now for sale on an auction site called gsaauctions.gov. I think it's the official US government auction site. And at the moment, this thing has 6 hours left. So unfortunately, I couldn't wait any longer recording this ramble, or it would have been quite interesting to see how much it sold for. Perhaps I'll do an update next week if I remember. But yeah, current bid is $290,000, which seems like an absolute bargain. 23 bidders. And I'll be very interested to see how much this sells for. So yeah, it takes up 28 racks. It's all water cooled, and I mean, your specs are all there. I mean, look at that memory, DDR4 2400 ECC. So I mean, it's bog standard off the shelf RAM, isn't it? This is probably the only thing that's bog standard and off the shelf about it, except maybe the server racks. But I'll link to that in the usual places in the description down below if you're watching on YouTube, and of course in the show notes if you're listening on your favourite podcast platform. And yeah, let me know, if you've got that kind of money, maybe stick in a bid and let me know how you get on. But cool thing. And sadly, it did quickly escalate out of my price range. So again, I won't have a chance to own a supercomputer, but maybe one day when I've got Logan Paul money, I'll be able to finally live that dream. So let's take a little break from all of that news just to talk a little bit about my YouTube channel and how it's been doing over the past week or so, which of course I always do in these rambles. And actually, I haven't released any videos since last week's ramble, which is very unusual for me because I've been absolutely on it this year, just churning stuff out. And there's a very good reason for that, and I will talk about that in a second. But first, I just wanted to talk about something that's an award that I got, I guess. Although it's not really that exciting, but it came from an old service that I used to use called vidIQ, which is like a plugin for YouTube Studio. Gives you suggestions on videos and tags and all of that kind of stuff. I used it for quite a while. I thought it was quite good, got quite a bit of value out of it. But in the end, the suggestions that it was giving me were very sort of samey, and I just got into the habit of doing all of that stuff anyway, so I just didn't really need it anymore. But if you have a small YouTube channel, probably worth checking out. This isn't a sponsored bit or anything like that. It's just a tool that I've used. There are other ones out there. I can't remember the name of the other big competitor that they have, but I'll link it all down below anyway. But one thing that I do still get from them are the milestone emails, and I actually got one a couple of days ago. And this is quite interesting because there's an interesting story that goes along with this. Now, I got an email saying, congratulations, your channel's hit 975,000 views on May the 1st, 2024, which is great. And actually, when you go back a couple of weeks, I actually received one of these on April the 5th, less than a month ago, sort of 3 weeks ago, saying that I'd hit 925,000 views. So 50,000 views on my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese, in 3 weeks, which is fantastic. And of course, thank you everyone ever so much for watching. Pretty much off the back of the success of the desk PC videos. But the funny story behind this, and kind of the whole funny situation around this, is that this isn't the first time I've been here. I've actually had these emails before, previously, a couple of years ago, when my solar videos went out. And I'll show you this on Social Blade, which is quite a good tool for looking at behind-the-scenes stats and things to do with YouTube channels. Of course, I will link to this if you want to go and check it out and have a poke around. Look up some stats on your favourite channels. Again, not sponsored. No sponsors on Reese Rambles, but yeah, you can see the. I mean, monthly gain subscribers is insane. Back in September 2022, so I got like 9,000 subscribers in 1 month, which was off the back of that video. But more importantly, I got 630,000 views in 1 month, and because of the kind of uptick off the back of that, when I finally did delist those videos in June of 2023, I lost over 1 million views in 1 day on my channel because views only count when they're on public videos. You make those videos hidden or unlisted or whatever, and yeah, you lose all the views off the back of them. And it does actually have quite a big impact on the performance of the channel and on YouTube recommending it to people and all of that stuff, which I've never really sort of moaned about because my channel's, I'm quite happy with the way that it's been going and the community around it. And ultimately, it's the community of regular viewers that kind of drives it. So that is that. But I just thought it was really interesting because obviously I got up to 1.5 million at one point, and then willfully just got rid of all of those and had to sort of start again from scratch. So to be nearly at the point where I'm at 1 million views again, and that should happen in the next couple of weeks, is really exciting. Not the reason I do this, but it's just a sign that people are liking what I do, and that's really cool because that's really motivating to me personally to carry on doing this. And I have had to put a huge amount of work into the channel and into the studio over the past week or so. And there is a very interesting story behind that. So yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, this set, as you can see around me, may look very familiar if you're watching this on YouTube. You've probably seen all of this before, but this isn't in the same place that it was last week. It's in a different location because I had some news about the rented office that I make this content in, that I record all of the videos for my two channels in. As you'll probably recall if you've watched the studio build videos, and I'll link to that series down below because it's quite interesting, I rented this office from a friend of mine who owns an IT business, which are based next door. And essentially his IT business was also renting the office that's attached to this. This is the meeting room that goes along with the office. And he sold the business. He sold the business in the past couple of weeks, which I had absolutely no idea about. I didn't know that was coming. And the new owners of the business basically want to start using that room a lot more, that office that they're paying for, essentially. And last week when I was recording my Ramble, there were actually voices in there. There were people in there, and they've changed all the layout and refitted it all as a meeting room. And potentially could start using it as an office and actually have some people in there full time. So I can't be recording just the other side of a very thin glass partition while there's people in there working, because I am sometimes here in the week when when I've not got other kind of work related stuff on because my job's quite flexible. But anyway, that's all just a load of rambling to basically say that over the past week I haven't been able to make any videos because I've had to dismantle the entire studio set and move it to the other end of the room. And yeah, so the landlord assures me that he's not going to be kicking me out anytime soon or anything like that, which is great to hear. He wouldn't anyway, he's a good friend of mine. But I've written all of this up. This is all over on Patreon, and this isn't some kind of ploy to get everyone to sign up to my Patreon. I put this on there as a free post just because it's quite a reasonable blogging platform to be able to share these stories. So I've got some pictures on there of the mess and the process of kind of relocating everything, a bit more detail about the story behind all of that and how it's happened. But yeah, very short notice, but I wanted to get moved down more for my own sake, and so I don't feel sort of quite so self-conscious, and also so I don't have microphones kind of picking up the noise from the office next door. So that's the big news from this week. Unfortunately, no video news, but yeah, big studio move, even if it is just in the same room. And the cool thing is that because the layout slightly changed, I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of build some extra bits that I've been wanting to do since the very beginning. Obviously, it's quite nice to have been using this space for 6 months now and have a good idea of how it kind of all works for me, and kind of the sticking points and the bits that I'd like to change. So I'm going to build a bit of an extra set area, and I have a very good idea of what I want to do with that and use it for a few kind of different types of videos. So that will be cool. Yeah, obviously the Rambles have now moved to the main desk, so I don't have the separate Ramble desk anymore. I'll probably get rid of that, which will clear up some space. And yeah, that's pretty much all the channel news that I have for this week. So let's get back to the usual stuff. My next story this week concerns the Panasonic 3DO. Yeah, I know. I mentioned it to my wife, Catherine, earlier today, and she gave me this blank look because it wasn't a console that she'd heard of. And I must admit, I think outside of this world of retro gaming, this bubble that we inhabit, I don't think it's one that most people have heard of because it wasn't a big seller. Although Wikipedia does inform me that apparently they sold over 2 million of them. I mean, I don't know anyone who owned one. Maybe it was a big seller in Japan or something. But it was a CD-based console. It was quite expensive. It was $700 when it was first introduced in 1994. And yeah, a RISC CPU, and it was a bit of a competitor to stuff like the Atari Jaguar and the Sega Saturn and that kind of era, before the PlayStation and the N64 came along and just blew all of those other consoles away. And it has its own dedicated cult following, which is always great. It's always nice to see the communities around these consoles. And yeah, just didn't kind of see all that many releases back in its day because it was quite short-lived. But yeah, cult classic console, much loved by the people that love it, and it's always good to see these older systems being supported, which is what this story is all about. So, Limited Run Games, who you're probably familiar with, release boxed games. Quite often they're things that never got a physical release, but they also re-release. They get the rights to older games and re-release them boxed with some nice collectibles and feelies and all that kind of stuff. And indeed, they re-released a game called D for the 3DO. Now, I don't know what D is. I haven't looked into the game itself. It says, Los Angeles, 1997. There has been a mass murder at a general hospital on the outskirts of downtown. Richter Harris has shut himself up in the hospital and taken hostages, leaving the police helpless and unable to move in. So there you go. That's about the game. And yeah, it's they've made this collector's edition, which includes a 2-disc physical copy. It's got a game slipcover, instruction manual, and a poster, and it says here it's an adventure horror puzzle type game. So that's cool. And there's been some controversy around this week. Why has that just disappeared? Oh, there we go. It looks like a nice thing, nice little collectible set for fans of the 3DO. But yeah, this comes from Todd Gill, who I know has been following my channel for a very long time. A big fan of his work with his company Retro Frog. Again, not sponsored, just a big fan of his work. But yeah, he's he basically tweeted that his copy of this game that he received was on CDR, so recordable CD. Now, the games that they usually do are pressed. They're actually made in a proper CD manufacturing plant, and you get a proper pressed CD. They're not expensive to make. If you make a run of a certain number of them, the cost per unit is actually quite reasonable if you're doing this as a commercial thing at that kind of scale. So it's very bizarre that they've actually they've decided to do this and burn the games to CDR like anyone else could do at home. And of course, this does come across as a bit cheap, but the main issue is that a lot of 3DO consoles, in fact, most 3DO consoles, don't read CDRs very well, if at all. Incredibly fussy. Of course, the modern CD drives are kind of designed to take those into account. There are certain types of CDRs that you can get that are more compatible with these older systems that people were sort of gravitated towards back in the day for piracy and stuff. And I remember all of that around the sort of the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. But yeah, to release a boxed, quite an expensive boxed collector's set on CDR rather than as a proper pressed CD is, for a console that doesn't support it all that well, it's a bit of a cheap move, and that's why a lot of people have been talking about this. And as someone else also pointed out in the replies, someone by the name of SFC Moogle, even if they did work, CDRs work for 10 years tops versus pressed discs 50 plus if stored right. So much about #ForeverPhysical. Now, I am going to argue with that, and I am going to say that I do have CDRs that are older than sort of 10 years old that do still work. I've got some from kind of the early 2000s. I don't even know if I might have some from sort of 2000-ish that still work. So getting on for 25 years. But I mean, the point does stand that I've got pressed CDs from the 80s that still work. As long as you store them in the cases in a reasonable sort of home environment, there's no reason that they'll sort of degrade and stop working, which of course recordable CDs were quite prone to. So yeah, a bit cheap on their part, but yeah, just a bit of a weird move. I don't think they've made any kind of statements on this yet. I haven't seen anything. They have. I've just spotted they did actually take the game page offline off their website. I actually, because I've had this tab open for a couple of days now, and I actually went to refresh it just now to check something, and the page has actually disappeared. So yeah, I guess that's that. So in that previous story, I mentioned the Atari Jaguar, which is a console that I have a lot of love for, as I'm sure you'll probably know if you've been following my channels for a long time. It's a console that I have an almost complete collection of games for, just a couple of the really ridiculously expensive ones that I haven't picked up. all the accessories and bits and bobs and stuff. And yeah, I was also involved with testing the fantastic game drive flash cartridge for that, which I did some videos about at the time, testing the CD support and stuff on that flash cartridge. So always happy to get involved with any kind of Atari Jaguar stuff. It's a console I always really lusted after and dreamed about when I was a kid, reading about it in the Atari magazines. And it's one that's not sort of well loved or well supported or kind of fondly remembered by the community at large, I think it's fair to say. So, but very interesting console, interesting architecture, and some quite interesting games on the platform, if not that many of them. So when a long-term supporter and fan of the channel, Boris Kretzinger, or Dataset User, as you've probably spotted him down in the comment section, when he contacted me a couple of weeks ago asking if I wanted to be involved in a big Jaguar project, I absolutely jumped at the chance, and I'm really, really pleased to announce that this thing is now public, so I can talk about it here and send you all in its direction. And of course, it's not the last time I'm going to talk about this, because I'm very excited to be involved with this. So let's take a look at the post over on Mastodon that Boris has posted. It basically says, why not start a game jam for the Atari Jaguar? Well, let's do it then. It's on now over on itch. So yes, this is an Atari Jaguar game jam. It goes on to say that the jam will last for 6 months, so that hopefully a few people will find time to join in, and I'll even throw in some prize money for first place. Got Control Reese and Carl Foran from Songbird Productions to join me in judging the entries, which maybe sounds a bit more posh than it should. Songbird Productions, proper game publisher, so that is posh. No need to apologise, but yeah, of course, this has a much more kind of in-depth detail page over on itch.io, which you can check out, and of course, which I will link in the usual places. And this is great, really good competition, chance to win €200 and the opportunity to get your game actually published by Songbird Productions, which is really exciting, and a digital badge to announce to the world that you won this competition. I'm quite tempted. I've never actually done any. I am actually a developer in my day job. Maybe this is an excuse. Obviously, I can't really enter the competition myself, but maybe the Jaguar would be quite a good system to tinker with. I think it'd be a massive pain, but there are some good kind of modern development tools that do make life a little bit easier. So there are a few conditions and stuff attached to this, of course. Every game genre is welcome, but it has to be a game that hasn't been released anywhere else. You can enter as an individual or as a team. No one-to-one ports of existing games from other platforms. Respect intellectual property. It must run on a real Atari Jaguar on the game drive, of course. It must include instructions. It has to run on PAL and NTSC machines. No kind of region locking on the Jag anyway. And it must be finished by October the 31st, 2024. Sorry, I'm getting a bit excited about this and starting to trip over my words a bit. And it will have a free public release, at least in the form of a playable demo. So the rest of the information is on here. It talks about talks about Jag Studio, which is a sort of a Jaguar development platform that you could use to build the game, and about the Big P Emu, of course, the emulator, excellent emulator that was kind of released recently for the Jag. So, of course, you can test it without having to have a proper development kit and all that, which are very nice, thoroughly modern and streamlined development, which should make life a lot easier on a platform that's perhaps not known for its ease of development. But yeah, so the games will be rated on a selection of different criteria. Like I say, this is all covered on the itch.io page. Originality, graphics, sound and music, playability, replay value, presentation, technical finesse. And indeed, I am officially a judge. So I'm very much looking forward to checking out any submissions that come through for this. And it looks like a really cool thing. So yeah, Boris, my hat is off to you for organising this. Really pleased to be involved with this. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. So go check out the itch.io page if you've ever been tempted to do any kind of retro game development or Jaguar development. Might be the kick that you need to get started. And now on to my video of the week. And I must confess, I haven't actually watched all that many videos this week on YouTube. I've just been so busy with the day job and the studio stuff. And yeah, it's unusual for me. I usually watch an unhealthy amount of YouTube. But I actually went through my history, just seeing, because there was one video that really caught my attention. But I went through my history, seeing if there was anything else over the past week. And no, it's slim pickings, so we're going to go with this one, and it's very, very, very worth your time if you haven't seen this. It's probably come up in your recommendations because it's been all over everyone's recommendations in the past week. But if you spotted it and been on the fence about it, consider this my personal endorsement. And this guy had a video that went viral a while back. In fact, I think it was the very first video he'd ever made. He had no subscribers at all, and then within a couple of weeks, this thing had like millions of views. And he's just absolutely on the money every single time about YouTube and about content creation and about how this whole world kind of works. And I guess that's why I find it interesting in particular. But if you're a viewer of YouTube, and particularly if you're perhaps not entirely on board with this whole shorts thing, short form content and all of that, and you kind of want to see someone put into words why it doesn't work and why it's all of a bit of a silly idea, this is the video for you. So this is Zachary Smigel? Smigel? It's probably not Smigel, is it? But yeah, he did a video a while back which was called Why YouTube Feels Different, and it was about kind of the commercial aspects and sponsorships and the algorithm and stuff like that. Had a very cool thumbnail that I think it said something like, I promise this belongs here or something, which caught everyone's attention. And he was absolutely on the money. And this guy's done all of his homework. He's got stats and figures and things to back himself up. And he just talks about short form content, about YouTube Shorts, about how the economics of it doesn't really work. How TikTok have kind of tried to sort of copy bits from YouTube, and YouTube have tried to copy bits from TikTok, and it's never really worked out. And how long term this whole thing just isn't viable, and how it's having a massive sort of cannibalistic effect on the long form sort of content that we all know and love, or that I certainly do anyway. So really interesting video, certainly the most interesting thing that I've watched this week, and yeah, just wanted to give it a bit of a personal endorsement and a shout out. So I'll link to that in the usual places, of course, along with all the other stuff. It's getting a bit late in the day, so I think it's about time I wrap this ramble up. So that's pretty much all I had for you this week, and I say had because there has been a very late-breaking development, something that's just come through that I've just had a very quick skim of, and I wanted to acknowledge because this is something I've been talking about in the Rambles for the past few weeks, and it's quite exciting, and it looks like it might potentially be good news. So I talked a bit about Accursed Farms and about StopKillingGames.com and this global campaign to basically get game publishers to actually support their games after they release them for a reasonable length of time, and that when they shut down the servers for any kind of online component or anything like that, to actually sort of allow the community to continue to support that and to allow the games to continue to work. Because, if you buy a game and then it stops working 2 years later because they've taken the servers down, that's a pretty terrible experience. And this campaign actually led to some petitions being submitted to various governments around the world, and one of them was the UK government. And I've just had a notification that the UK government has actually responded to this petition. So the way that this works here in the UK is that we have this official Parliament website, and anyone can submit a petition to it. And if you get 10,000 signatures, they will actually give an official response. And if it gets 100,000 signatures, they actually debate it in Parliament in person, which is quite promising, considering we're up to 17,000 already. But yeah, of course, we've broken through that 10,000 barrier, and I did sign this in the end. I know I said previously that I wanted to give it a bit more thought, but I don't like to jump on every single bandwagon that comes along. But I decided this was actually sort of a genuinely good thing to be involved with. So yeah, it smashed through that 10,000 signature barrier within a few days, and the government has given quite a long-winded and detailed response, which I haven't had much time to kind of look at, but it basically talks about UK consumer law and about the way that the games are advertised and about our rights. We have quite strong consumer rights here in the UK, thankfully, although we did kind of lose some of those when we left the EU, but let's not talk about that here. Yeah, it talks about our consumer rights and how these games are advertised and about them not kind of meeting expectations and how they're kind of initially advertised and stuff like that, and what our rights are in that particular situation. But it's not a non-response. I'm sure there are people out there who've had time to actually pick this apart properly, and people who are far more knowledgeable about this stuff. But it's quite a detailed response, and it does look like it's kind of laying the foundations for, actually, yeah, this is a genuine consumer rights issue, and perhaps something that should be looked at in a bit more detail. We already kind of have laws in place that address this kind of stuff, but yeah, perhaps that's the foundation for something a bit more detailed that applies to this specific situation. So, of course, I will link to that. Like I say, I haven't had a chance to read it sort of in detail myself, but all looks quite promising. So that's some good news. And I need to get this wrapped up. I need to get this edited. I need to get this uploaded. And most importantly, I need to pop to a shop before they close to pick up my bank holiday beers. So thank you ever so much for joining me again this week. I'll see you again next week. And hopefully now the studio is back up and running, I'll be able to get some stuff recorded over the week. So that's that. Thank you very much. And all that's left is for me to say goodbye.